Welcome to Module 2, where we talk about the essential part of generative AI, which is called prompt engineering. Now, we need to understand how generative AI works at the core. At the core, it works about using a concept called natural language processing. So, in our natural language processing, what we try to do is to understand each word as a vector and put it through different machine learning models that are related to natural language processing. What does these models do is to understand the vector, how it is formed, and try to predict the next word. For example, let's take example of our LSTM model. What it does is it tries to understand the context of the words in the sentence and tries to predict the next word. Now, how does it work is uh, in a real life example is let's take an example of auto completion. Now, how does auto completion in your Gmail or in your phone works? Auto completion works using large usage of LSTM, where LSTM tries to retain more memory when compared to other models that are available. LSTM tries to understand the words and tries to predict the next word. Now, why are we talking about all this? We are talking about all of this is for us to understand how we can give an efficient input to the LLMs so that we would be able to get an efficient and desired output from these LLMs. The input that we try to give to LLM is called a prompt. Why? Because we are prompting it to look into its knowledge and get back to us in the way we wanted. This is called prompting in English, and the industry has used this same word uh, to define what is a prompt, right? So essentially, engineering this prompt is called prompt engineering. We try to construct a prompt in such a way that we get the efficient output. So, as I told you, let's take an example of a prompt, which is nothing but a question. Like, what is the capital of France? Now, this is just a question. Now, what if I wanted to give it as an instruction? Write a poem about summer. So, this is an instruction to it. Likewise, if we want to have a context as a prompt, we can give it as here is a product review that I got for my DSLR camera. Now summarize it. That is nothing but we are trying to set a context for the LLM to understand we are talking about a DSLR camera and we want a product review to be summarized. So these are the different ways you can form prompts. Why it matters? As I told you, the better the prompt, the better the output. It is our way of programming the generative AI engine without coding, right? And how well should be a prompt formed? Let's take an example of, let's say, if I just give write something about dogs, it is a very weak prompt because we are not specifying how it should come out. So my generative AI LLM can give it as a huge text describing about a dog or a small paragraph, or it can even conclude it in a sentence. So we never know. It all depends on the configuration that we have set for the LLM. I'll come and talk about this configuration in the later part of this module. Now, what could be a stronger prompt? Now, what if I specify to the LLM that I want a 100-word article about why golden retrievers are great family pets? Now, what we are doing here, we are specifying a breed. We are talking about why golden retrievers are great family pets, and we are confining it to 100-word article. Now, this is more specific, and your LLM will be able to be specific in the output if we are specific. So it's all about how you engineer it in a way that you want the response. Now, let's put a structure and template on top of this prompting, right? Now, there are different types of prompts that you can do. Direct instruction with no examples, like, translate this English sentence into French, right? Without giving any example, you just getting your work done as a direct instruction. Few short, for example, provide examples to guide response, right? Example Q&A pairs before your interview or questions. And another way of prompting is instruction based. Now, we are trying to, let's say, create a PowerPoint presentation. Now, I can say, write a presentation about prompt engineering. It is very vague and it can start giving me a chunk of information which I don't need to put into my slides. So it all depends on the audience. It all depends on my style of teaching, isn't it? So I would want to give instructions to it explicitly mentioning that I would want the core concepts of prompt engineering to be inscribed in this PPT, and I want some examples in each slide so that I can demonstrate it to my audience. That's how you can do it in an instruction based prompt. Now, how do you know that a structure of a prompt is very good? This is how it should look like. Initially, start with your instruction. Let me take the same example that I just spoke to you. It's about a PowerPoint presentation about prompt engineering. Now, I would first give my initial set of instructions. Next, I'll talk about the context. So, this is the context I would want to mention in my example is I would not want any mathematical information or core engine of LLM information or how a prompt is reduced to a mathematical vector. All of this I don't want. I just want the conceptual and practical knowledge of prompts and how can I use it immediately? How can my audience use it immediately? So this is how my context would be. Examples, if I want to give an example, I would say mention about the types of prompts, structure of a good prompt, a template, what parameters that you take into consideration when you are using these prompts is what I would give. Next, format. How would I want the format? Here I am building a PPT, so I want as a slide title and content bullet points. So this is how I form an entire prompt and then put that into my generative AI tool, ChatGPT or Gemini, and get an output similar to what you're seeing right now, right? Now, parameters that shape an output. So we should definitely understand what is happening under the layer of LLM, right? Once we give the prompt, what is happening within it is what we wanted to understand. So there are certain parameters that shape the output which are crucial for us to understand. One is something called temperature. What happens is when you set the temperature to a lower level, it is more focused. Think of it as focused and more predictable. So I know what I'm giving. In my previous prompt, I mentioned it to talk about the types of prompts, right? So when I set my temperature of my generative AI engine to zero point 0.2 or something similar, it would be more focused and addressing my question rather than splitting what it knows completely about prompt engineering, right? Now, what if I give it as high, which means you will see more examples with more creativity, varied information that doesn't necessarily make sense. Now, what if I make a PPT with so many stories building for each slide? It will be boring, and people who already know about it would be feeling sleepy, right? So I would want my presentation to be focused and simple. So I would set my temperature to a lower temperature. Next parameter is max tokens. It's It's about limiting the length of the response. Once again, now I don't want a huge PPT just to explain the prompt, right? So I would want to limit it. So I'll set the max tokens to a certain value so that it gives a limited response, limited length of response. Now, top P is something called nucleus sampling. It's more about neural networks within the LLMs. So it's another way of controlling the randomness. Now, my focus is on prompt and generative AI. So my LLM should be talking about prompting in generative AI context. But what if I allow a lot of randomness? It can talk about prompting for chat gpt or gemini for creating images. Now I don't want it to go beyond my topic right now. So these are the parameters that you are seeing on screen are responsible for your output apart from prompting, right? So when we take care of these two, when we are building a generative AI engine, our output will be catered to the questions asked by the users. Now, again, an example of changing temperature here for you to understand. Write a tagline for a coffee shop is my prompt. Now, if my temperature is less, it only talks about fresh coffee served daily. Okay. Now, what if I increase my temperature? Its creativity increased. Now, your generative AI engine or LLM will give an output saying, awaken your soul one cup at a time. Now, think of it as you are running a coffee shop business, and which one would you choose in between these two? A left one or the right one? I would choose the right one because I want my customers to be thinking about it in a creative aspect rather than a bland, fresh coffee served daily kind of a thing, right? So that's where your parameters come into play. What are the common mistakes that we all make while prompting? I think by now you must have realized your previous chats with ChatGPT or Gemini or any other tool uh, is not giving an output that you desire in your mind because your prompting is too vague. As simple as tell me about cars or write an essay, but you did not mention how long. You said summarize, but you never said in a bullet format or a tabular format like that. Also, what if you're overloading your prompt with conflicting things? For example, I wanted to visit China, but tell me the places that I can visit in India. So your LLM is bound to be confused about whether you wanted to visit China or you wanted to look into Indian places that you want to visit, right? Now, what are the best practices in an industry perspective for you to build a generative AI and when you build a prompt template for it? We need to be clear and specific, add context if needed. You can set the output format to bullet pointed or tabular or JSON. Experiment with examples to guide tone and style to your LLM engine. Adjust the temperature for creativity as we discussed. What are the key takeaways that we are taking from this module 2? Is that your prompting is everything. The way you prompt decides the way you get the output. Also, apart from prompting, we have something called parameters that we use when we initiate a generative AI or generative AI engine or LLM. We're going to see that in action on how these two, the differences that we make with these two will largely impact our output. Thank you so much.